This is a story about an adulteress who's in the lineage of Christ. Our story begins in 2 Samuel 11, where the spring of the year the kings go out to battle, and David stayed home. It doesn't tell us why, but this was several years into his reign over Israel. He might have been in his 50s, maybe older. Skill may be declining a little bit. As someone who had been a warrior since their teens, I suspect that David wasn't happy about being left behind and maybe was in a midlife crisis. Did not have the option of a Corvette during this time period. So instead he paces the roof, maybe trying to see what he can see from the rooftop. And what he does see is a woman bathing. And he asks who she is. It turns out that she's the wife of one of his top men, Uriah, who is at the battle that he's not at. He has her brought to his place where she becomes pregnant. And David tries to get her husband to take credit for the baby, but when that didn't work out, he sends Uriah to the front of the battle lines where he's killed. Bathsheba mourns for her husband, but then marries David because she's pregnant. Of course, God knows all about it. Nathan, the prophet, goes to David and chastises him for his actions with Bathsheba and Uriah. David repents. Eventually, David and Bathsheba have a son who soon dies. And Bathsheba, I'm sure, mourns the loss of her son. Bathsheba then, she becomes a part of his life. 1 Chronicles 3:5, it mentions there are 4 sons between David and Bathsheba. We have Nathan, who was probably named after the prophet that chastised David. But he's also the son mentioned in the lineage of Mary in Luke 3:31. Whereas Solomon, the other son that we're pretty familiar with, is in the lineage of Joseph that's mentioned in Matthew 1:6. So Bathsheba has 2 boys in the lineage of Christ, one on each side. When Absalom rebels and takes over the kingdom, David fled Jerusalem with his family. Bathsheba was probably part of the group that fled with David to hide from Absalom. David left some of his women in Jerusalem to take care of things. Absalom rapes these women that David left behind to apparently show his control as the new leader of Israel. Of course, we know that Joab retakes the kingdom for David, and everyone eventually returns to Jerusalem. At some point, Bathsheba is also told that her son Solomon will become David's heir. Bathsheba continues to be with David until he's old. Adonijah, David's oldest son at this point, gathers supporters that include Joab, David's general, and Abiathar the priest, to take control of the government. Nathan goes to Bathsheba for her help. With Nathan's urging, Bathsheba goes to David and tells him about Adonijah's coup and reminds David that he had promised her that her son Solomon would be the new king. Nathan comes in after that and reiterates the story and tells David about Adonijah's rebellion. David gets all of his guys together and they anoint Solomon the new king before Adonijah can do anything about it. After David dies, Adonijah goes to Bathsheba and requests that she ask her son Solomon for Abishag as a wife. She was David's young wife who would give him body heat when he was old and cold. Bathsheba relates the request to Solomon, but apparently this was a devious way for Adonijah to set the stage for another rebellion. Solomon realizes this and has him killed for this second rebellious attempt. Solomon is author of many of the Proverbs, and as the mother of Solomon, Bathsheba may be the thought behind Solomon's admonishments to not forsake the law of your mother. Or Solomon might be telling his boys some thoughts from one of his 700 wives. Not sure. Some suggest that Solomon might be King Lemuel, who's mentioned in Proverbs 31. He is, then the words of King Lemuel are the ones that are taught to him by his mother. If this is Solomon, then these would have been the words from Bathsheba. Bathsheba is so interesting. She's kind of a Forrest Gump in that she had a life where she was involved with a lot of famous people and infamous acts. She was the wife of a soldier. She was an adulterer. She was the wife of a king. She was the mom who lost a child. She was homeless, running from a coup, and eventually the mother of a king. She seems to take things in stride. She never instigated anything. When Adonijah began organizing his coup, Bathsheba's not the one who ran to David. Nathan had to drag her into it to get her involved. Her actions indicate that she's a follower. She seems to be a pleaser as well. She never confronts anyone about anything. There's a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, Oklahoma, and there's a song from it that says, "I'm just a girl who can't say no. I'm in a terrible fix." So that song makes me think of Bathsheba, someone who just doesn't know how to confront anyone respectfully, and she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Her story's important because I think it's common for us to want others to like us. And a lot of times it's easier to go along or to follow someone else's lead. In fact, we're all followers at some point. But being a follower can be a problem if the lead takes us down a bad path. And that tendency took her into adultery because she couldn't confront David. Although she'd been through the Absalom rebellion, she seems oblivious to the politics and repercussions when Adonijah asked for David's wife. To me, this is also a little naive. On the other hand, Bathsheba seems very calm. She is trusting. She had a king who killed her husband, but she didn't seem to hold a grudge against David, unlike some of David's prior wives. She lost a son. She didn't hold that against God. She wasn't bitter, as we've seen some other people be. She had one stepson having her run for her life, and another that tries to take over the kingdom, and she didn't seem to hold any of that against anybody. I walk away from Bathsheba's story thinking how easy it is to follow others, and how important it is to understand what's right. I wish you had learned from the 5 sisters we talked about in Numbers about how to politely confront others. It might have saved her and David a lot of anguish. Thank you.